Hey everyone. I was gonna wait on this, but it seems like if I wait much longer, it's gonna be too much to put in here. Wednesday night here, and I say it every video. It's like, oh my goodness, things are just getting crazier and crazier. I was watching. Well, not really watching. It's hard to avoid the news anymore, the things that are going on. But I was reminded of when I used to watch the news regularly, and you'd hear the tagline at the beginning or at a certain point in the show, in the news report, our top story tonight. And I started to think about, with everything that's going on, what would our top story be? It's almost like any one of these things or others could be the top story at any point in time. They're just coming right and left. Let me give you a little bit of what I'm talking about here, just as an example. I remember when major earthquakes were a big deal. One that comes to mind is years ago when I was a young man, maybe even a child. I guess I was a kid. Big earthquake in Nicaragua, and hundreds of people lost their lives. Even Roberto Clemente, a major baseball player, went down there for disaster relief, and he was killed in a plane crash on his way. So earthquakes were a big deal then. We had a pretty big one recently, right? In Turkey, 7.8 on the Richter scale, and followed by, I think it was 7.5. Thousands of people have lost their lives. If you've seen any of the videos, it's amazingly terrifying, the things that have happened there. That lasted in the news cycle for a minute. It's gone. Nobody's talking about it anymore. Today, there was another one in Hawaii, 4.8. A pretty serious earthquake, busted open a small volcano. Bet you didn't even hear about it. What have we heard about? Well, last video I did, we were talking about balloons. I thought the balloon that drifted across the United States was kind of an oddity, and that might be the end of it. Oh, nay. No, now we have UFOs that are showing up everywhere and being shot down. And of course, we missed with the first shot and hit it with the second, and nobody knows where the first heat-seeking missile, what happened. Well, they cleared out the airspace, so it landed in Lake Huron. But you heard nothing about that. You heard nothing about that first miss. You've heard nothing about what's on these supposed UFOs or balloons, or it's just we're being inundated right and left. There was here's one. This is one that is just it literally turns my stomach. I believe it's East Palestine is the way they pronounced it. It looks like East Palestine, Ohio. You're finally starting to see news reports on it. This thing has been going on for over a week. Toxic chemicals released, burned into the atmosphere so that they could clear the lines. Governor DeWine approved this burning. Do yourself a favor, look up some of the videos of this, the clouds that are over this community. It's just horrific. And people were told nothing. It was basically okay. And then a week later, maybe you might want to drink bottled water. Fish are dying in the rivers there, but maybe now after a week you might want to drink bottled water. There might be some danger. Might be. In case you're not familiar with where this location is, the Ohio River Valley. This is the heart of America, where some of our major tributaries flow. And all of these toxic chemicals are landing in there and being washed down the river. Nothing to see here, nothing to worry about. Don't eat. Nope. Don't worry your pretty little head about it, because It's all good. I think it was just yesterday, maybe it was the day before, in Tucson, Arizona, just outside of Tucson on I-10, they had another major chemical spill. What is going on? Why? We've got earthquakes, we've got balloons, we've got UFOs, we've got toxins being released into the air and into the water. Oh, and then we've got Ukraine and Russia and China. Yeah. That whole thing is fascinating. China's threatening to retaliate because we shot down their balloon, if it was indeed their balloon, that they sent over our airspace. Oh, that's good news. Good news. Good times. And of course, Russia and Ukraine, so supposedly Ukraine is achieving victories there. Of course, there's evidence that some Russian ships are sailing in the Baltic with nuclear capability. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry. Don't even worry about it. Nothing. Nothing there. So our top story is, which one of those? Well, I don't know. Maybe this one would be your top story. We have another shooting at Michigan State University. And of course, all the gun confiscation and gun regulation people are up in arms. Now we're finally going to, yes, we are. We're going to limit, you're not going to have the access to those guns anymore. A couple of issues with this one. This is Michigan. Governor Whitmer. She's not a Republican. She's not a Second Amendment person. She hates guns. How did it happen, Governor Whitmer? Oh, maybe you should talk to the prosecutor who in 2019 released the shooter on a weapons charge she just dropped the charges. You know why? Well, because, equity. You know what I mean by that, don't you? Let's just say he wasn't Irish, and we'll leave it at that. And I don't really care what his ethnicity is, but clearly this prosecutor did, and that was the reason for releasing this gentleman, who now, 4 years later, shot up a university and killed 3 people. But it's the gun's fault. Right. Absolutely. As I've been posting, if we're going to start blaming inanimate objects, we need to start outlawing all the inanimate objects that can kill. So let's start with planes, trains, and automobiles, because we've got those killing people right and left. And just in Ohio, where we've got one right now, a train that's releasing toxic chemicals. We just had a U-Haul wipe out a bunch of, it was being driven, but it was the U-Haul's fault that wiped out a bunch of people. And that. Just shut up with your nonsense. It's not an inanimate object. It's sick people doing sick and twisted things like they have throughout history. Stop with your propaganda. Stop with your posturing. Stop with your nonsense. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Stop it. Just stop it. It's nonsense. And people who choose to believe it, I got news for you. This guy, he could have used anything to kill these people. Not too long ago, I saw a horrific story of a man who beheaded a woman in the street. It wasn't a gun. It was a big knife, sometimes known as a sword. So just shut up. Just shut up, okay, with your nonsense. You're not going to cure evil by outlawing inanimate objects. Not going to happen. Here's another thing that could be a top story. Nord Stream, not the store. Nord Stream. What is Nord Stream? Well, that's the Russian pipeline that they used for gas to get into Eastern Europe. which is facing a whole lot of issues with the price of fuel and home heating and dead of winter. They had a minor, well, not minor explosion. It was blown up, is what it was. And of course, our president, Joe Biden, was sure that Putin did it himself. Right. So Putin blew up one of the main sources of income in the middle of a war against Ukraine. How's that benefit him? It didn't. And it kind of made him mad. First you blew up his pipeline, and then you're accusing him of doing it. He's doing a little bit more saber rattling about retaliation against the United States. Pick your top story. There's more, probably. I mean, you could deal with inflation, you could deal with shortages, you could deal with dishonesty in politics, you could deal on and on. State of the Union, it's painful. And you know what it all is? It's a distraction. It's a great big distraction. None of that. I've said this since I can't even remember when. If these are the things they're reporting on, what am I missing? What's going on behind the scenes? You've heard me talk about Klaus Schwab. You've heard me talk about Noah Yuval Harari. You've heard me talk about AI. You've heard me talk about all of these things. All of this is designed for a reason, to create fear, to set up an environment where now we need, I'm going to use the word, a savior. But don't worry, our fearless leaders, our elites will come and save us, and they will give us the capability to be better humans in a better planet, in a utopian world. You think I'm making this up, right? I'm not. That is their goal. Matter of fact, I think it was Klaus Schwab, and I'm loosely paraphrasing, but it's pretty close. He said just this week that those who control the information will control the planet. Yeah. And by information, he meant data, AI specifically. Those who can get out in front of it will be the ones controlling the planet. So there's just some of the things you could pick from for our top story of the night. I have a different one. You probably knew that. I'm going to start in the book of Amos in the Old Testament of the Bible in chapter 8 and verse 11. And it's Amos 8:11. It's a verse that I've remembered for years and years. And I remember the first time I read it thinking, I can't even believe that's in the Bible. But I could see it happening then, and this is going back decades. Amos 8:11 says, "Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord God, that I will send a famine on the land." Now, some people would say we have a famine, and we do in many parts of the world today. But he's not talking about a famine of food, because he goes on, he said, "Not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the word of the Lord." The days are coming when there will be a famine, the hearing of the word of the Lord. Why would that matter? Well, you could start with what Jesus said in John 17, And apparently I've got the Indy 500 going outside. The devil doesn't want you to hear this, obviously. That's my lovely neighbor on his rice rocket. Not winning, Satan. Sorry. So, God has told us there will be a famine in the land. Why? A famine of the word. Why? John 17:17, Jesus said, sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. You see, God is trying to sanctify his people. He's trying to set them aside. He's trying to prepare them for a very special day. And the devil is trying to push that word away. He can't let it be. And so how can he push it away? Well, he can drown it out. He can drown it out with mayhem, with fear, with chaos, with pain, with misery, with all sorts of distractions. But God has said that that word is exactly what we need to be sanctified by. And then Jesus said some other things. I want to read these fairly quickly. In Matthew 24, in verse 6, he says, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginnings of sorrow. This is a very important passage. Jesus specifically warns us. He specifically tells us that there's coming a time that there will be wars. There's going to be rumors of wars. Well, I would say, look, I get it. I know these things have been going on throughout history. But at this magnitude and this constant and this rapid, I don't recall anything quite like this, especially when you combine it with the rest, with famines. Think about the famines around the globe. Now, I know we're talking about the famine of the word just a little while ago, but think about the food shortages, which brings me to another potential top story. How many food processing plants have to go up in flames before we realize there's something going on here other than just accidents? This is, you know what? I don't care. Call me crazy. Call me a conspiracy theorist. Tell me I'm wearing a tinfoil hat. I don't care, because you know what's... conspiracy theories that I've seen, that I've talked about, that I've shared, they're not conspiracy theories, they're spoiler alerts. So consider this a spoiler alert, because it talks about famines, and we've got, in this country, I've lost track of how many different processing plants for food have just gone up in smoke. You know what the Ukraine is one of the largest producers of? Grain. That feeds the world. Well, have you heard anything about supply chain shortages because of issues with China and other places? Have you noticed any rising in cost in the grocery stores? We were at one of the grocery stores here, and they made some changes that made it very difficult for some of the homeless people that used to come in there just to get a chicken quarter. They made it so costly that they can't do it. Where do they eat? What do they do? That's in the United States. What's going on around the world? Famines and pestilences. You know what a pestilence is? It's a plague. It's another word for a plague. What's another? Let me think. What could be another? Look, like an epidemic, maybe, or a pandemic, maybe. Yeah, maybe that. Well, good thing we don't have any of those going on. That was another thing that was mentioned at the World Economic Forum. Our next pandemic is coming up. How do you plan? Planning pandemics now? How? It's almost like it's Well, anyway, so pestilences, famines, pestilences, kingdom rising against kingdom, and earthquakes in various places. I just mentioned two major ones this week, one of them incredibly severe. These things are the beginning of sorrows. Drop down to verse 11. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many, and because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. Many false prophets. Do we have any of those? Well, we have a lot of churches here in the United States. You see, false prophets aren't just those from other denominations. In fact, the most dangerous ones are those who are bearing the name of Christ that you think you're following Jesus. There are those who won't touch controversial subjects. They won't touch hard issues. Look, I'm all for dealing with the love of God. Nothing moves me like focusing on his great love. But part of that great love is warning people about where they are, where they're living, the times that they're living in. It isn't just praying that this world is going to get better and my life in this world is going to get better. I would love that. I would be thrilled if that were the case. We live in a war zone. How is it going to get better with famine, pestilence, wars, earthquakes, lies, deceit? There's coming a famine of the word. In the last days, Jesus said these things would happen. I want to continue on in Matthew 24. Drop down to verse 21. Sorry, checking my note. Sometimes I got to do that. Verse 21. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been seen since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. For the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, or there, do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the very elect. See, I have told you beforehand. I'll probably deal with this somewhere down the road. I don't want to get into all of it right now, but just based on this passage alone, we are headed for very, very, very hard times. There are some preachers I've looked up to and I've been blessed by that still want to be preaching fluff, good times, transformation, everything's going to turn around. God's going to pour out a blessing and make your life wonderful here. Jesus said exactly the opposite, that there will be great tribulation. And it's going to be so bad, that unless he shortened the time, nobody would survive. You still think it's a game. You still think it doesn't matter. This is why Jesus said the famine of the word was so important. This is why I've shared with some people this week one in particular who was attacked, who does a good work, I believe. And look, no Christians in 100% agreement. I don't even care. But this is somebody who I know absolutely loves God and pours their heart out, trying to save people and turn them to their Father, to their Savior. I admire that, and I'm thankful for that. And somebody took it upon themselves to attack this individual. You will be attacked if you share the truth. You'll be in the minority. I was attacked. I've been attacked. As a matter of fact, I got it again today. It's just whatever. Do we stop? Do we stop sharing the truth? Do we stop sharing the gospel because somebody doesn't like what I said? You know, when Jesus was when he ran into the demoniac, they was cursing him and, what have I to do with you? Went after Jesus. Why would we be any different? So what I told this individual is what I've had to tell myself many times. There's one accuser of the brethren. You can't let him stop us. Preach the word. Preach the word. And the word is, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Some bad times coming. Bad times, but Jesus will shorten them. He also said there are going to be false Christs and false prophets, and this is the part I was talking about where I think I'm probably going to deal with some of this later. There's too much. It's too much. But there is going to come a time. I mean, we have false prophets now, people with false messages, proclaiming that this has come from God and blah, blah, blah. We've got false prophets. But there are going to be false Christs, and not some whack job. No. These are not people that you're going to look at and go, who's going to believe that crazy person? Because Jesus himself said that they're going to show great signs and wonders. They're going to do things you can't explain. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Miracles. If miracles are your criteria for determining who is being led by God, to the word and to the testimony, if they speak not according to these things, there is no truth in them. There is no light in them. False Christs, false prophets will be doing great signs, not just little ones, great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, the very elect. And then the most important part of this, Jesus thought it was important enough that he's telling us in verse 25, see, I have told you beforehand. I've told you what's coming so you can be prepared. Crazy times. Excuse me. So back to our top story of the night. You know what mine is? It's amazing. Go with me to Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2. This is the top story. All of that other stuff, scary stuff. Here's my top story in Acts chapter 2, which is actually quoting Joel chapter 2 in the Old Testament. In verse 17, it shall come to pass in the last days, says God, that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your young men shall see visions. Your old men shall dream dreams. I'm thankful for that. I have gray hair. And on my men servants and on my maid servants I will pour out my spirit in those days, and they shall prophesy. I will show wonders in heaven above and in signs in the earth beneath. You can drop down to verse 21. And it shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Here's good news. This is God's actions in the last days. When all of that other nonsense is going on, God's actions. His promise of pouring out his Spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. You may have seen this. I'm not sure. It's starting to get a little traction. Asbury University in Kentucky. If you haven't heard of this story, do yourself a favor, look it up. The videos are amazing. Amazing. Asbury University in Kentucky, February 8th, 1 week ago, they had a chapel service. At the end of that chapel service, something very strange happened. The students wouldn't leave. They have been in that chapel nonstop for a week. People coming from communities all around, churches all around, and now coming from out of state, traveling. They have been sitting in that chapel singing. And this is not wild. This is just glorious praising of God. A week straight, God has been pouring out his Spirit on that little chapel. It's a fulfillment, I believe, of what Acts chapter 2 is about, what Joel chapter 2 is about, that God is going to pour out his Spirit on all flesh. All those other things we saw, those aren't the top story. The top story is what God is beginning to do. But don't be afraid. We're heading for awful time. Don't pretend it's not there. But don't fall prey to that famine, the famine of the word. God has promised to pour out his Spirit on all flesh, that your old men will dream dreams, your sons and your daughters shall prophesy and see visions. We know there's a lot of deceit coming. There's already a lot of deceit here. There's one who will always be true. We need a revival like they're seeing in Asbury, but we need it in our own lives, in our own hearts. And sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. So, our top story tonight is God's moving, God's coming, God wins. Have a great night. I will talk to you very soon.